This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN, who for years have delivered humanized privacy and security solutions to safeguard your data and privacy online. Virtually travel the world, browse privately by encrypting your internet activity, block ads and malware that get in your way, and much more thanks to their easy-to-use tools. Plus, get an extra 4 months when you sign up using offer code SKILLUP at checkout. More details after the video. Look, I'm going to say plenty of stuff during this review, but here's the most important thing I'm going to say. If you have a PS5, go buy this game right now. Turn off the video, don't bother watching it, just savor every surprise by seeing it in-game for the first time, and savor every moment by just going to play it as soon as you can. This game, man, this fucking game, look, it's incredible. I don't know how you top Returnal. Like, I don't actually know how you do that. Somehow the people at Housemarque managed to pull it off, and this is another shining jewel in Sony's first-party lineup, and a must play title if you have a PS5. Okay, so if you are still here, you probably want me to do my job and, review the damn video game. And while I wish I was presently playing it rather than writing this script, you are right, so I will oblige. Tagline for Saros is "Come Back Stronger." It's a line that's meant to represent the main character Arjun and his ability to not only come back to life after death, but also come back stronger by way of meta progression upgrades that are one of Saros' defining features and a real point of difference between Saros and its predecessor Returnal. But I think the line can also be applied to Housemarque themselves, who have come back to this third-person bullet hell genre that they violently shoved forward with Returnal, and they've come back stronger because in every single way, Saros is a better video game than Returnal was. Like, it looks better, it plays better, it somehow sounds better, it has better, more engaging storytelling, the weapons and perks are better, movement tech is way better, everything is just better. Sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot, but always better. You may be wondering why this game is called Saros instead of Returnal 2, and I actually asked the game director Gregory Luden this very question when I interviewed him for the Friends Per Second podcast. He told me that Saros isn't Returnal 2 because this new story, this new storytelling technique, this new setting, and this focus on meta progression all mark clear lines in the sand, making this more than just a sequel to Returnal. And while I can certainly understand that view, my personal experience playing this is that this is Returnal 2, and I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. It is an evolved and improved version of that formula, but most of the essential aspects of that formula remain intact, namely the combat loop, the level design, and the roguelike structure. I think you could have called this Returnal 2 and no one would have been at all confused by that, but clearly Housemarque were looking to make a declarative statement that they see this as more than just subtle iteration. Perhaps on some level, the name change is partly about leaving behind some of Returnal's baggage, a game that was phenomenal for those who could actually get through it, but was simply too challenging or too rigid for those that couldn't. Viewed in that context, a name change makes a lot of sense because by far and away the biggest changes that Saros delivers is structure changes and meta progression, making it far easier to make progress in the game and significantly reducing the penalty of failure. But this more accessible structure and these new progression systems have in no way reduced the inherent challenge of the formula, because there are still so many ways to dial up the challenge should you choose to, and doing so makes Saros an even more satisfying and more rewarding experience. Just that now there's always a nice cushioned floor beneath you that catches you when you fall, with that floor gently rising up and up as you fall again and again. Put simply, Saros is Returnal, but better in every single way for the people that loved it, and it's more accessible to the people who wanted to love it but couldn't. That's really it. Now everyone can and should and will love this, because Saros fucking rocks.
The sun is forever.
I need to know that I just made the right decision.
This is what it does. It gets in our heads, and it twists, and it turns.
Saros is the story of Arjun Devraj, played by Rahul Kohli. Arjun is part of a rescue mission dispatched to a distant planet called Carcosa, trying to track down the whereabouts of the previous exploratory and scientific missions, all of which went dark after touching down. Only that's not Arjun's only reason for being there. A woman by the name of Nitya was on one of the prior missions, and Arjun is singularly obsessed with tracking her down. Indeed, the mission he's on to rescue the scores of people who are missing often seems like a bit of a nuisance to him as his gaze is singularly fixed on Nitya.
They're here. They need us. I can't let them down.
What seems like a fairly straightforward premise is anything but, as it quickly becomes clear that Carcosa harbors a dark, or dare I say bright secret that has everything to do with the sun and its regular eclipses. It's not a spoiler to say that the sun is really messing with people's heads. The very minute you touch down on Carcosa, one of the team members snaps, possessed by a voice not their own.
It was promised.
I need to know that I just made the right decision.
It's me, boss.
After this, what begins to unfold is a gripping cosmic horror mystery that centers on not only Arjun, but also his squad. And this is one of the biggest differences between Returnal and Saros. That previous game's narrative had a limited cast of characters for reasons that I certainly won't spoil here, but it's a much broader cast here in Saros. They've each come to Carcosa for their own reasons, and each of them wrestle with the threat of the sun in different ways.
Stack. What are you on about?
I have seen it, heard it, like a dream far beyond these walls.
Maybe you should get some rest.
It's a chilling notion, actually, almost like being trapped in a pot being brought to boil. You know which way it's going to end, but the question is how much heat can each person take before they're cooked, and what are they willing to say or do to avoid or perhaps embrace that grim fate? The central cast aren't the only way that Saros tells its story, though. While exploring Carcosa, you'll regularly find audio logs left behind by people from previous missions, each of them telling their own story of their own desperate struggle to retain their sanity, flecked by hints that their sanity has already long left them. Delivered seamlessly as you explore and fight, and doled out in just the right measure during repeated runs through biomes, these story snippets are always worthwhile little snacks while you await a main course back at base.
The timestamp data on the E2 black box gives me a new hypothesis. I can't focus with all these people so close. And the whispers. The others were right about the whispers.
The best parts of this story, though, I can't share with you, but I will say this. The concept of a roguelite is inherently an insane concept. Like, imagine if you kept dying and coming back to life, repeating the same hopeless mission again and again, and each time you step out into the world, it's slightly different. Like, if that were actually happening to you, you'd think that either the world was broken, or your mind was broken, or both. Saros' story is a recursive feedback loop that, for the first time I can recall, sets the roguelite structure against itself, prompting its main character to both confront and ignore the inherent madness of a landscape that can reorganize itself and his own flesh that can remake itself. It's brilliantly written, and it's brilliantly told, and it's brilliantly voiced by the actors. It's just brilliant, and the mystery of Carcosa, the mission to find survivors, and Arjun's obsession with Nitya all kept me utterly riveted throughout my entire playthrough. Let me say right off the top that I'm not even going to show you the best looking biomes in this game because it's better for you to see those in-game for yourself for the first time. But what I am going to show you is probably more than enough to convince you that Saros is an incredible looking video game, and given how fast all of this moves and how clear it all remains while it's in motion, it's yet another strong showcase of the power of the PS5 and Housemarque's talent in putting that power to work. Just as in Returnal, you're exploring a hostile alien landscape built by someone or something that is clearly not human. There is an inherent hostility to its architecture that makes you feel, at all times, deeply unwelcome and also small, since the structures you're exploring and fighting in have often been built at monumental scale. Each of the environments looks striking and distinct. The rocky waste of the first biome looks somewhat in keeping with what we saw in Returnal, but Housemarque completely rewrite their own design rules with the second biome, which is an underground sewer-style space festooned with technology. When combined with the mechanical enemies that reside there, it almost feels like you're fighting squiddies in the underground of the Matrix. It just looks incredible. I won't say how many total biomes there are, but I will say that there are significantly more than what Returnal served up, and each of them are bigger, and each of them are more interesting to explore owing to their scale, their secrets, their layouts, and their puzzles. The biggest contrast to Returnal spaces is that Carcosian biomes will often employ a transformative mechanic triggered by the eclipse, and I guess we first need to explain what that is. Every new biome in Returnal can be explored under the sun's uninterrupted light. Here the level is in its default state, with less threatening enemies, and with those enemies dropping less currency, and with the pickups you collect being pure, aka no corruption, no trade-offs. At some point though, Arjun is always forced to trigger the eclipse. At this point, shit gets wild. Pathways that were before blocked off are opened, more enemies spawn, they're more ferocious, and they inflict semi-permanent corruption damage on you. They drop even more currency when you kill them, so they're also more rewarding, and all the artifacts and weapons you collect are now corrupted, so that each benefit they provide is offset by some sort of negative trade-off. But that's not all. The eclipse can also make environments themselves more hostile. I won't spoil all the ways this manifests, but one example is this swamp level. Pre-eclipse, all these red pools you're running through are pretty harmless, but under the eclipse, these same pools turn poisonous. That's right, they added poison swamps to Returnal. Miyazaki-san would be proud. Many of these biomes have eclipse triggers, and some of them are so good that I found myself like laughing. I was like, I can't believe they did this. Just incredible stuff. Another thing that sets Saros' level design apart from its predecessor is its embrace of Metroidvania unlocks to fuel exploration, and to incentivize you to return to earlier biomes you've already cleared. Returnal had permanent upgrades too, but they were often used to get you through levels faster on repeated clears, since the game's structure was centered on needing to clear spaces over and over again. Here in Saros, you can always teleport to any new biome you've unlocked, so returning to previous biomes is always optional. As such, the focus on permanent upgrades like grapples and jump pads and charged melee attacks isn't about giving you shortcuts through the levels, but rather giving you more ways to explore those levels once you're there. From the very first biome, you're already being teased with sections locked behind upgrades you haven't yet acquired, and the final permanent upgrade isn't awarded until like the very end of the game, so you're always being nudged to return to earlier parts of the game because there's stuff waiting for you there. But of course, it is all entirely optional, and if you want to just focus on your quest to find Nithya, you can do that too. I think the final point to make about the world design is that you have a very different relationship to space in Saros than you did in Returnal. The forced repetition baked into Returnal structure was much closer to a traditional roguelike experience, where early levels are run every single time because that's how you start a run. As such, you developed a high degree of familiarity to Returnal spaces. No such familiarity emerges here in Saros, unless you wanted to. Once you've cleared a biome, you can instantly teleport to the start of the next biome on all future runs. That means you never spend so long in a place that you get sick of it. Instead, you push through it on a first clear and then return to it intermittently for specific reasons. To farm up levels and gear up ahead of a big push, or to unlock currencies or collectibles now accessible owing to some of those Metroidvania power-ups you've collected. With this framing, trips back to previous biomes are jolly excursions rather than punishments for failure, and it fundamentally alters the way you take these levels in, because these return trips are almost always about peeling back the layers of these spaces, finding new things that you didn't find the first time around. I said in the intro that Saros is Returnal but better in every way, and I think the environment design is the perfect example of that. More biomes, better looking biomes, bigger biomes, biomes that transform under the eclipse, and biomes that invitingly welcome you back rather than punishingly forcing you to play them again and again against your will. Visually, thematically, and structurally, Housemarque found a way to make it all better. And they didn't stop there, because just wait until you get your hands on these controls. As soon as you get hands-on with Saros, you're like, Arjun, slow down, buddy, let me catch up. Returnal was by no means a slow game. In fact, it was pretty quick, but it did feel like there was a bit of an immediacy gap between what you could sense and what Celine was capable of actually doing. It wasn't much of a gap, but it was there. There's no such gap here in Saros. Immediacy is the best word I can use here, because the speed at which Arjun moves, how quickly he can pivot, how short his dash timer is, how precise and versatile his jumps are, there is no gap between your intent and what Arjun can do. It is entirely down to your ability to read the battlefield, avoiding threats and creating opportunities for yourself in every moment. And there are a hell of a lot of threats to avoid here, because the work that Housemarque has done on enemy design is just absolutely nuts. There's two categories of enemy, mechanical and organic, and together they provide such a rich combat chessboard. Organic enemies are by and large bestial in nature and focus on close quarters combat. Their job is to suffocate you with their relentless aggression, pushing you out of safe spots and into the open. In contrast, mechanical enemies are more about creating battlefield-wide threats that demand you move with precision and intent. They're the ones that spit out most of the pyrotechnics, and honestly, going back to look at old Returnal footage, it seems almost quaint now compared to some of the madness that some of these combat arenas are capable of serving up. One important thing I'll note about enemy design is that Housemarque have responded to one of the biggest pain points of Returnal, namely the difficulty spike that came from alpha level enemies. Returnal was actually a pretty easy game most of the time, but then a big alpha dog would rock up and they were just like this massive difficulty spike that felt like you were suddenly playing a completely different video game. These things were literally harder than the actual bosses. Here in Saros, there are alpha enemies and they are more challenging, but their difficulty has been precisely calibrated to feel like a more graduated step. This means less frustrating deaths, and it also broadens buildcraft options, since previously you needed to build almost exclusively with these alpha enemies in mind. Now you have a lot more freedom to build however you please. Moment-to-moment combat also greatly benefits from improvements to movement tech. Grapple is used much more during combat arenas as a means of repositioning. Jump pads are also plentiful. There are other movement techniques that I won't spoil yet, but they too add to the speed, precision, and strategy of combat. The overall damage and sustain framework is also deeper and more rewarding too. Saros adds a shield mechanic that can be brought up at any moment, and it'll absorb the blue projectiles, which then gets converted into ammo for your power attack. These These yellow projectiles only appear during an eclipse, and they apply corruption damage that not only damages you but also reduces your max HP, though you can clear this corruption by killing enemies. The red projectiles cannot be dodged and they cannot be shielded, they can be parried. Pressing R1 at the precise moment will send these projectiles back to whoever sent them to you, inflicting not only damage, but also stagger damage, since every enemy in the game has a stagger meter that leaves them vulnerable when it fills up. Between dashing, jumping, grappling, parrying, aiming, and shooting, there is a lot to keep your fingers busy at all times, so if I can offer one piece of advice, it would be this. If you can play with a controller that has back buttons like the DualSense Edge, it gives you a massive, massive advantage. I had jump bound to the right back button and grapple to the left, literally never had to take my fingers off sticks during combat. It's just an absolute game changer in a game that demands so many quick reactive movements. But that is, of course, not the only way to make Saros easier, and this is where we get to one of the game's defining characteristics, its meta progression, and along with that, an evolved approach to difficulty. I've already spoken about Saros' structural evolutions, allowing you to teleport to new biomes rather than having to re-clear the previous ones every time. I've also spoken about the difficulty smoothing that comes from revised enemy design, but the biggest way that Saros becomes easier over time is this thing, the skill tree. It's not at all complicated in the sense that it's pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. Push as far as you can, collect currency, die, spend that currency to unlock permanent stat upgrades that make future runs easier. It's a pretty massive tree and you won't fill out all its nodes without doing many repeated runs. The intention isn't to fill it all out. The intention is to fill out as much as you need in order to progress. I actually found progression through Saros to be pretty smooth until I reached one of the later biomes that was totally shrekking me. I went back and ran some old biomes, collecting currencies and artifacts and weapon upgrades as I went, and that gave me the stats I needed to push through that later biome, and then I went back to base to deposit all that currency, making future runs easier. I actually think this is a really important point to dwell on here. Saros is hard if you boot up the latest biome and step into it trying to clear it without having farmed up some levels first. If, however, you take a bit of a run up to it and clear some previous biomes first, you are going to get pretty fat with stats, to the point where I'd say progression becomes pretty easy, like at least way easier than Returnal ever was. But important to note that this is not Housemarque stepping back from their commitment to difficulty, it's just them giving the player choice. You can choose to break through new biomes without farming up, or you can choose to make things easier for yourself by clearing previous biomes first. It just takes time. The same philosophy applies to this modifier menu, where you can make the game easier or harder by selecting modifiers such as you do more damage or the enemy does more damage. You can ignore this entirely if you want, or you can utilize it to take the edge off something you're struggling with, or to make things harder if you're feeling like things are just too easy for you. It's entirely up to you. But the most important takeaway here is that Returnal was as hard as Housemarque wanted it to be, but Saros is as hard as you want it to be. And anyone who wanted to fall in love with Returnal but couldn't because of its rigid structure and punishing difficulty, Housemarque made Saros for you, but they also didn't leave behind those that still want that really grueling challenge. Rounding things out now, and Saros delivers the same industry-leading audio that Returnal did, in that you can see this game with your ears as much as you can with your eyes. The third-person perspective naturally limits your ability to see threats behind you, but the Tempest audio engine combined with Housemarque's wizardry make for a soundscape that is so easy to pass, clearly separating ambient sounds from those you need to react to, all while having an absolutely incredible soundtrack blasting the entire time. Saros is also the best showcase of the DualSense controller, outside of Astrobot of course. Reactive triggers allow you to feel the halfway point of a press, which is actually how you engage your weapon's secondary fire, and the haptics are firing so rapidly that my controller runs out of battery after like 20 minutes. Okay, not that long, but way faster than other games, that's for sure. So yeah, Saros is like incredible industry-leading visuals and sound. It's one of the few games that utilizes the DualSense's full suite of features. It's gripping storytelling without ever over-indexing and lengthy cutscenes that take you away from the action. It's more levels, bigger levels, better levels, levels that transform during the eclipse, new movement tech, a new approach to Metroidvania upgrades and how they're utilized, incredible enemy design with difficulty spikes smoothed out to reduce frustration, an entirely new game structure that's less about repetition and more about exploration, and a new approach to difficulty that gives you a variety of ways to tune the difficulty to whatever level works for you. All of that is incredibly impressive, and as I said at the top, I just couldn't imagine somehow topping Returnal, but Housemarque cleared that bar with a lot of room to spare. Me personally though, the biggest reason that I love Saros as much as I do is because of its evolved feel. It is faster, it is more immediate, it's more strategic and engaging, and when all of the tools come online and you internalize them and commit them to muscle memory, you stop thinking and you just start feeling. There are so few barriers between what you want to do and what you are able to do. And when that veil falls, instinct takes over and you find yourself doing incredible things without even thinking about it. There are very few games that manage to make me feel like that. I think the last one was Silksong, and that was one of my favorite games over the past, I don't know, forever. I fucking love that game. I love this one too. I knew Saros would be good, but I wasn't expecting it to be this good. It is next level, it is must play. I strongly recommend it to you. Accessing the internet is getting harder and harder every day as governments and corporations continue to enact things like age verification, geo-blocking, and straight-up censorship. Thankfully, this video sponsor Surfshark VPN exists to help you take your internet freedom back, allowing you to browse the web both freely and securely. I mean, we all know about content geo-blocking, where certain TV shows, films, and games are inaccessible to you based on where you are. Surfshark lets you sidestep many of those restrictions with a click of a button, virtually teleporting you all over the world so you can watch or play whatever you please. But there's also the online shopping angle too. I mean, regional pricing is a thing, and depending on what you're buying and where it's being shipped to, certain online retailers won't let you make purchases depending on where you're located. Again, Surfshark lets you quickly and easily get around many of those restrictions so you can buy what you like and get a good deal while doing it. Of course, there's also the security angle. Surfshark encrypts your data, making it safer to browse the web, and their dedicated antivirus or alert tools take security to a whole new level, protecting you from viruses or malware and notifying you if a large-scale hack occurs that may leave your data exposed. It's super convenient since Surfshark can be used on a range of devices from PCs to phones to tablets and more, and their intuitive user interface makes it so easy to use. Sometimes it's as little as one click and you're away. I love it. I would never not have it installed on all my devices, and if you want to check it out for yourself, you can visit surfshark.com/skillup, and if you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout, you'll get an extra 4 months when you sign up. A great deal for a great product. That's surfshark.com/skillup. Offer code SKILLUP at checkout for an extra 4 months. Thanks Surfshark for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.